Hello, and welcome to the Helix Initiative's Research Paper Breakdown tutorial video. Research papers are vitally important in STEM because they're the vehicle for information between researchers and any other people wanting to know more about a certain topic. This is a breakdown of the 9 general sections of research papers. Sometimes science lit papers can be really long and complex, but they're not impossible to understand. Just a small disclaimer, the word study will be used throughout this presentation, and it'll be used as an umbrella term for any kind of study, experiment, or research project a paper may cover. That being said, let's get into it. So, given that research papers can be complex, you don't have to understand every single word or concept presented. Just gather enough to fulfill whatever goal you had in mind before reading the paper, whether that's using it as a source for your own research, getting to know more about a topic you're interested in, or anything else. While they can be intimidating, research papers are a valuable resource and make the spreading of scientific information possible. Starting with the title, it's essential that you read the title of the paper before getting into the content. It provides a very brief overview of what the study's main idea is in about 3 to 20 words. A tip is to search up any words you're not familiar with in the title. It's important that you understand the overall context of the paper before attempting to actually read it. A side note is that Google will become your best friend when it comes to understanding research paper content. Moving into the abstract, it's normally found in the first few pages of a research paper, and it's pretty much just as important to read as the title. Similar to a blurb on the back of a book, it gives an overview of the study and also lays out vocabulary that you'll want to familiarize yourself with, as the vocab used in the summary of the paper will most likely be important within the study itself. So, how else is an abstract useful? Well, if you're perusing databases and just want a paper that applies to whatever you're doing, reading the abstract will help you gain an understanding of what the paper is usually about in around a paragraph. We'll end this slide with reiterating the original tip with both the title and the abstract. Look up any words you don't know. Any information presented in both of those sections is going to be important, so make sure you know what they're outlining. For this slide, we'll cover the introduction and the background and hypothesis. Starting with the intro, not all research papers have them, but they're normally found after the abstract, and they're essentially a more in-depth look at the purpose of the study. Authors may introduce the technology they use in the study if applicable, and they may outline vocab they use in the abstract more in detail, among other things. Intros can be useful if a paper interests you, but you want a more detailed look at the study itself. Moving on to the background/hypothesis, similar to intros, not all papers have backgrounds. It really depends on whether the authors found a background section necessary. Normally seen after the intro, a background goes even more in depth on vocab terms and provides context to the study, such as why it benefits the world of science. As for the hypothesis, it's a testable question that is being proven or disproven in the experiment, and it can be presented at the end of the intro, but sometimes it's more subtle and it's inferred as you read the intro. Some studies may not have a hypothesis at all, depending on the nature of the study. In this slide, we'll cover the materials and methods section, a diverging point, as well as the results section. For materials and methods, this section's location is dependent on the study, and it outlines how the researchers gathered their data, describing, if applicable, the technologies and materials used, and it often discusses data analysis such as chi-square and standard deviation. Examples of technology researchers often use include fMRI, EEG, various microscopes, and much more. Between the materials and methods section and the results section, papers tend to diverge. At this point, researchers usually begin to describe the core of the study and go through their procedure and observations. This section can also get complex, but take your time and search up any terminology that you're not familiar with and feel it's necessary to know. Just use your best judgment. You may also come across some graphics and such in this section, so take a look at those, and that can be helpful for further understanding the study. For the results section, the name is relatively self-explanatory, but the results section is normally found after the core description of the study, and its purpose is to completely relay the observations and findings of the study. This slide will cover the discussion and conclusion sections. Usually found after the results section, the discussion portion is primarily used by fellow researchers to discuss the study's findings and how it contributes to science, as well as how its findings can or should be studied further. It allows for the research community to compare a certain study to others too. Oftentimes, if a researcher is low on time but needs to read a paper, they'll skim over the title and abstract, then skip down to the discussion for a comprehensive overview of the results and why that paper is applicable to modern science. As for the conclusion, it wraps up the overall paper and summarizes the math, if applicable, proposed in the paper and explains the results without numbers and outlines any possible errors. The discussion and conclusion of research papers sometimes are combined since they serve similar purposes, but that decision is ultimately up to the authors of the paper. Next up, we have the references section. It's always found at the bottom of the research paper, and its purpose is to cite the trail that led the researchers to their conclusion apart from their own data. Since science builds off of itself and studies are normally specific to one topic, researchers have to give themselves more background on the topic they're researching in order to have a complete study. Additionally, the references provide credit to other researchers. In terms of proper citations, researchers normally use MLA formatting like what you would use in English class, but APA is often used in psychology. On the second half of the slide, you can see an example of a professional citation. It points out the author's title, date of publishing, and the paper's DOI. This is very common in MLA citation formatting you'll see in research papers. If you're writing your own research paper and are receiving help from a mentor, a helpful tip is to simply ask them what citation method to use in your paper. Also on this slide is another example citation from an undergraduate journal, which you can see outlines almost the same information as the professional one, the only difference being that instead of a DOI, or which is called a digital object identifier, the citation credits the publishing source of that paper. So where can you even find these papers? There are hundreds of databases, journals, and overall resources out there that have millions of papers on them, including Scopus and PubMed. And a fun fact about them is that they have around 71 million and 30 million items available, respectively. Now, those are some pretty big numbers, so a tip for exploring these databases is instead of trying to search through papers via the search bar, which can turn into a bit of a hassle, try going through the references section to find similar papers to the topic you're searching. And as mentioned before, that section houses all the studies conducted that the researchers that authored the paper you are reading from pulled information from, so they're likely to be closely related to the topic you're looking into. Thank you for watching Helix's research paper breakdown tutorial, and I hope you're now a bit more familiar with the structure of research papers. Make sure to follow the Helix Initiative's Instagram, where you can find a bunch more awesome Helix content. Additionally, stay tuned to this YouTube channel for even more videos like this one. Thanks again, and until next time.